on the topic of how you can actually gain successful access to the huge automotive market in India from the perspective of India type approval. And today we have with us audience from over 10 countries within the APAC and EMEA region, from the likes of Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Korea, Thailand, India, Philippines, and Indonesia. And my name is Ryan, and I'll be your moderator for today. And before we begin, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. So firstly, on the topic of connectivity, if you do encounter any audio issue, we will encourage you to dial in through the phone based on the webinar ID and number available in the webinar email. And if you are unable to view the screen, we will recommend that you re-log in again. And next, we will also strongly encourage you to ask any questions through the Q&A function, where you will be able to send to us any questions or clarifications you may have for today's webinar. And we will be addressing them at the end of the presentation. And next, moving on, just a quick introduction for Truthviolent. We are one of the world's leading independent and testing and certifications providers in the world today, and we are headquarters in Cologne, Germany. And this year, in 2022, we are celebrating our 150 years anniversary, and we look forward to partnering you in the years ahead to deliver quality and safety for your customers and beyond. And today, we are very happy to have Mr. Banda with us for today's webinar. And currently, Mr. Banda is the Vice President of Truthviolent Mobility for the EMEA region, and he brings with him over 35 years of automotive experiences under his belt. And with his technical expertise in evaluation for the automotive segment and global market access services, he played a key role in the establishment of the mobility business in our company. And before he joined Truthviolent, Mr. Banda has also acquired a wealth of experience with the Automotive Research Association of India, where he worked closely with key automotive players to level up the automotive standard in India. And next, I also have the privilege to introduce Mr. Saraf, who is currently our General Manager for the mobility business. And he brings with him over 30 years of automotive experiences specializing in components and passive safety for European approval and market access services. And prior to joining Truthviolent, Mr. Saraf has gained immense experience in the Automotive Research Association of India as well for over 15 years, where he worked directly with a wide variety of automotive OEMs and component manufacturers. So right now, without further ado, I will now pass the mic over to Mr. Banda to kickstart the presentation. Mr. Banda, over to you, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Ryan, and good afternoon, everybody. This particular presentation, or today we are in the webinar, what we arrange for the, you can say, the entry or the market access to India. India, we have two different systems which will be explained or which will be given in details by my colleague, Mr. Shekhar Saraf. Fortunately, what happened, India started all his India's whole vehicle type approval, you can say, in 1991. Prior to European whole vehicle type approval, which is happened or which took place for the M1 category in 1996. So India is having, you can say, older history of whole vehicle type approval. And it is good that Saraf and myself, we are came from the particular agency, we call it ARAI, where I was actually involved in this particular type approval, whole vehicle type approval establishment, or the you can say the introduction to the industry. Today we will cover most of the things which require to make sure that you will get all the information for exporting your vehicle or components to India without any hassle. The thing is not only the information you are getting out of this, but also our team, we have the team for the market access, which is very well equipped, well knowledgeable, having vast experience on the Indian type approval, and they will support you very well. So I will not take much time for the introduction, because all this is there in our presentation, and we will give more time for the question and answer, because you will have a typical questions after going through the presentation. So we will be very happy to answer your questions and take it ahead forever. Thank you. Yeah, Ryan, Mr. Saraf?
Yes. So, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you, Mr. Saraf.
Yes.
Yeah. So, good afternoon to everybody. And thank you, Mr. Ryan, for kind introduction to this seminar, Introduction to Central Motor Vehicle Rules, CMVR, which is a Indian type approval. So, just a small introduction about our Indian mobility team. And to Friendland, India is having the various locations across India, having the register office in Bangalore. And mobility division M04 business, we do the European approvals and then various countries approvals like CCC China, SNI Indonesia, or InMetro Brazil, ADR Australia, or PS Philippines. Also the DOT or FMVSS test reports. Then we handle the Indian type approvals for the customers from China, Japan, Korea, Thailand, Europe, and USA. We do the third-party witness test and then issue the test reports. Also, we do the third-party equipment calibration and issue the reports. Third-party audits, which sometimes requires by the OEM for their tier 1 suppliers. Then we do the facility assessment and issue the certificate about the facility, including the manpower or the lab personnel, their competency, and the specifications of the test facility, which is mainly the based on the 17025 guidelines. Then we conduct the training programs for the design engineers, then proficiency improvement program for the industry engineers. So this is our MAS team organization chart. Mr. Bandali is heading, and then there is a team who are handling the various approvals. Different portfolios are assigned, and across the various countries we get the customer requests, and also from the Indian customers we get for the various countries approvals, and this team handles both of the requirements for the customers. Our strength, we handle the motorcycle, light vehicles, passenger cars, commercial vehicles, trucks and trailers, and also the agriculture vehicles. These are the short list of our customers OEM in India, which includes Maruti Suzuki, Hyundai, Honda, and also the Fiat, Renault, Nissan, Mahindra and Mahindra, Ford India, Ashok Leyland. There are also the two-wheeler manufacturers like Bajaj Auto, Hero Motocorp, then the TVS Motors, Ola Electric, and so on. And these are the component manufacturers, tier 1 suppliers for these OEMs, which mainly for the lamps, tires, seat belts, electronic assemblies, mirrors, bulbs, horn, wheel, and safety glasses, safety belts, like that. So we'll now start our key topic, Indian type approval procedure and also the COP. So when the Indian type approval is required, when you are supplying to the OEM or the replacement market in India, then you must need the Indian type approval as per the Central Motor Vehicle Rules. I will explain in detail what is CMVR, but for when you are supplying the components to OEM, you need CMVR type approval. And when you are going for the replacement market, then also there are two ways, either CMVR approval or the BIS approval. So there are two different schemes are implemented in India. In my presentation in the due course, I will explain in detail what are both the schemes and where the schemes are applicable and how we should go about this. So supply to OEM and CMVR type approval, will go for the details in the CMVR type approval. Now the system is like when any vehicle is introduced in India, flying for the Indian roads, then vehicle type approval is required. And in vehicle type approval, the few components listed in the Central Motor Vehicle Rules are also need the type approval certificates. And this vehicle type approval and the component type approvals are issued by the designated test laboratories. These are the authorities mentioned in the CMVR, and those will be conducting the test on the components or the vehicles, and then Based on the documentation, specifications, and so on, they will issue the vehicle type approval as per the CMVR. Basically, there are two types of standards. One is the IS, that is Indian standard, and another is AIS, that is Automotive Indian standard. So both the standards are applicable while conducting the test. I will also explain this difference between these two standards in my presentation. So once the testing is completed, there is a marking requirements, type approval certificate number marking, or the components having E mark, and the manufacturer don't want to give the separate type approval, Indian type approval certificate mark, then also E mark is acceptable. So history about the Indian type approval, that is Central Motor Vehicle Rules, we briefly called as a CMVR. The harmonized motor vehicle certification came into force in India from 1991. As Mr. Bandal already told in his introduction, that it is a whole vehicle type approval in India is earlier than the European whole vehicle type approval. And this was introduced with the Act of Parliament and notified as Central Motor Vehicle Rules of 1989. So although rules started preparation in the 1989, the completion and then the introduction or the implementation started in 1991. Since 1989, and when it is implemented in 1991, the type approval and COP procedure was implemented in a phased manner. That means not the complete vehicle and the components are introduced for the type approval or the COP, but it was applicable in the steps, so that OEMs also got some time to redesign their components, vehicles according to the various requirements. And then this CMVR basically addresses the issues pertaining to construction and maintenance of motor vehicles, safety of the motor vehicles, environmental, licensing, registration, and administrative and legal requirements with respect to the vehicles. As everybody knows, motor vehicle means any mechanically propelled vehicle adapted for use on roads, whether the powered propulsion or thereinto from an external or internal source, and it includes the chassis on which the body has not been attached and a trailer, but does not include a vehicle running upon fixed rails or a vehicle. So railway is not covered into this. And type adapted for use in the factory to enclosed premises or a vehicle, that is the off-road, or the vehicle's engine capacity not exceeding 25 cc. Then the Central Motor Vehicle Rules of 1989, these are the abbreviations used in the presentation. MVA is Motor Vehicle Act of 1939 and 1988. MOEF is the Ministry of Environment Forest. MORTH is the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. MOHI is Ministry of Heavy Industries. MOP is Ministry of Petroleum. These are the various ministries which contributing into the preparation or the Central Motor Vehicle Rules, and they are somehow related with the requirements mentioned in CMVR therein. BIS is a Bureau of Indian Standards. Then the IS Indian Standard. AIS is Automotive Indian Standard. AISC is Automotive Industry Standard Committee. CTSC is a CMVR Technical Standing Committee. CEA is a criteria for extension of approval. COP is conformity of production. Then we have a SIAM, SIEM, that is a Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers. It's a society of all OEMs, and they are also the main stakeholder in this standard making process or the implementation of new standards, that is the process. And another is the ACMA, that is ACMA, Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. They also contribute into the CMVR process, implementation, and so on. And another is the TMA, that is a Tractor Manufacturers Association. So these are the main stakeholders in the implementation of CMVR. Now, what is the scope of CMVR? The chapter 5 of CMVR deals with the construction, equipment and maintenance of motor vehicles. The technical aspects thereof are covered from rule number 93 to rule number 138. So various technical requirements are mentioned in rule number 93 to 138, and other rules that is before 1 to 92 and after 138, they mainly describes about the administrative requirements for the vehicles. Rule number 124 mentions about some safety standards for the components and their COP. What are the components to be tested or the type of process, the type approved as per which Indian standard or the automotive Indian standard, and what is the COP process for the particular component, the validity, and so on. Rule number 126 is the prototype of every motor vehicle to be subject to test. Every manufacturer of motor vehicle other than trailer and semi-trailer shall submit the prototype for test by the authorized test agency for granting a CMVR compliance certificate. So any manufacturer for the vehicles, which includes two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, light truck, bus, all the vehicles, must apply to the authorized test agency for granting a CMVR compliance certification. Rule number 126 describes about the testing agencies referred in rule number 126 above. So which are the agencies designated or accredited by the government, central government, who can conduct the test as per various standards, Indian standards and automotive Indian standards, and then issue the type approval certificate, and for vehicle issue the CMVR certificate, and also takes care about the COP process. Rule number 127 is the quality certificate by manufacturer. So once the manufacturer get the CMVR certificate for the vehicle, then he needs to give the quality certificate for the sale of every motor vehicle, so that it gets the registered with the local road transport authorities. So these are the authorized test agencies. Few test agencies having the complete scope of CMVR for all vehicles, all category of vehicles, also the components, and some agencies have the limited scope. So ARAI, that is Automotive Research Association of India, which is located at the center of India near Mumbai, and it is in Pune, where the two Friendland office is just 10 kilometers from the ARAI. Then the ICAT, that is International Center for Automotive Technology, which is situated in north of India near Delhi, and we have our office in Delhi also. Another is GARC, that is a Global Automotive Research Center, which is situated in south of India. Again, there is also our M04 colleague sits and handle the approvals at GARC. Apart from that, there are another 4 agencies, which are VRDE, which is Vehicle Research and Development Establishment. It is again at near center of India and just 100 kilometers from Pune. Next is IIP, that is Indian Institute of Petroleum, which is in the North India. They have a very limited scope related to the environment, that is the emission test on engines and the vehicles. Next is CIRT, that is the Central Institute of Road Transport, which is again in Pune, but mainly deals with the road transport vehicles. And another next is CFMT and TI, that is a Central Farm Machinery Training and Test Institute. This generally deals with the off-road vehicles, mainly the agricultural tractors and a few construction equipments. We'll see how the framework of the automotive regulations. So as I explained, various ministries like Ministry of Road Transport and Highways, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Ministry of Consumer Affairs, and the DGFT, that is the Director General of Foreign Trade. These are involved directly or indirectly while implementation of CMVR or the making the regulatory framework for the vehicles running in India. Now, for the standards, various standards introduced like Indian standard or the Automotive Indian standards, there is a CMVR Technical Standing Committee, which is the apex committee who finally works on the draft received from the other committees, and then it is processed administratively to make a standard as a final version. Then Automotive Industry Standards Committee, AISC, which includes the stakeholders like a test agency, then the representative from the various ministries, which I had explained. Also, the representative from the automotive vehicle manufacturers, that is OEM, representative from the component manufacturers, representative from the tractor manufacturers, and the committee works on the various standards, write down the various requirements, and then recommends to the technical standing committee. Then there is another standing committee which mainly deals with the emission legislation, and this committee is directly working with the Ministry of Environment and Forest, and then based on the recommendations they suggest to the CMVR Technical Standing Committee. There is another way, I will explain in detail, Bureau of Indian Standards, that is BIS, which comes under the Ministry of Consumer Affairs, and this is the main body who published the Indian standards as IS and with the various numbers, and deals with the ISI mark after the or issues the license for the various components. It is not handling only the automotive components, but it covers the all equipments, components for the household or the electronic components, something like that. And these various committees, the ARAI works as a secretary for these various committees and arranges the meetings, talks with the various stakeholders, prepares the drafts, discuss in the various committee level meetings, and then finally submit the draft to the CMVR TSC committee. So these are the different stakeholders as I explained. So TSC for the safety components and emission, they discuss on the new regulations, new requirements, new standards, and then it is further discussed with AISC, that is Automotive Indian Standing Committee, Standards Committee, or the technical committee, and then they formulate the draft standards, and further with the help of SIAM and the automotive component industry, those representatives also takes the active part in the various meetings for the finalization or the formulation of the standards, and which is after discussion, after necessary changes, final draft is submitted to the ministry, and ministry finally notifies the standard, and then it decides also the implementation timing in consultation with the automotive component manufacturers also and the OEMs also. Sometimes Supreme Court of India also gives some guidelines for making new standards, but these are mainly based for the environment related, that is the emission standard. So those guidelines are also taken into consideration for drafting the standards related to the emission. So once the standard is notified, how the flow goes on for the process to get the type approval certificate. So once the notification of new standard by MORTH or the respective ministry is published, then the component and system compliance application, so component manufacturers has to apply with the documents, drawings, technical specifications to the authorized agency, and authorized test agency will conduct the test, conduct the audit, and based on the successful results, they will issue the component level test reports. Then these component level test reports are accumulated by the vehicle manufacturer to prepare the vehicle compliance application, in which all the components and the type approval certificate numbers are mentioned with the specifications, and the agency will cross-check the specifications mentioned in the vehicle application as well as the component level test reports. And once it is clear, the type approval certificate is issued by the test agency. Then next step comes the production, the vehicle production and compliance as per the specifications are finalized by the manufacturer. Once the vehicle is ready, it goes for the registration, and for the state transport authorities, there are the guidelines and also the document issued by the manufacturer. Based on that, the vehicle is get registered, and in use vehicle, there are some pollution level checks after certain period, and it is also like a part of COP, but COP is applicable for the manufacturer. This is that PUC is applicable for the in-use vehicles. So end user has to go to the PUC center and check the vehicle for the various gases from the emission and get the certificate for PUC. So before introducing this CMVR, what was the background? There was no COP procedure for safety critical components. COP was available only for the emission norms. Only test reports were issued based on the prototype components from 1991, and those reports were used or active till there is no change in design, material, process of the component. So whatever component certificate issued in 1991 was still usable after 10 years or the 20 years. So there was no requirement on the checking of the consistency in the quality. Then the need was felt to maintain the consistency in quality of the components to achieve the safety, and all COP procedures were introduced for the components in a step manner, which are in line with the ECE regulations. The Indian type approval conformity of production, COP for mass emission, as I explained, it was started in 1993. After that, COP period for the emission was at least once in a financial year or based on the plant-wise production quantity of the vehicles. So it was both period or the volume base. Then scope extended to the agricultural tractors, power tillers, construction equipment vehicles and generator sets. COP for the safety critical components brought under purview of COP with effect from April 2009, and it was in a phase manner. So not all components made mandatory for COP in one notification, but the notification was introduced or the published in the phase manner. So later it was in October 2009, then April 2010, and so on. So we'll go in detail what is the procedure for type approval and establishing the conformity of production for safety critical components. The standard published for the process of conformity of production is AIS 037, that is Automotive Indian Standard Automotive Industry Standard number 037. So AIS 037 is notified in Government Resolution 784E in dated 12th November 2008, and also it was introduced, or the rule number 124.4 was amended, and AIS 037 was introduced in the CMVR. And the implementation phase, as I explained, it was phase 1 April 2009, then October 2009, third phase April 2010, and now almost all critical components are covered in AIS 037, that is for the COP process. So there are the different ways of the publication or the notifications. One is through GSR, that is a general statutory rules. So first draft for public opinion is introduced or published, and then followed by the mandatory or implementation date. It is again based on the public opinions, discussions, some amendments if required, and then the final implementation date. And another way is statutory orders. Here there is no public opinion, it is directly decided by the ministry, and date is mentioned in the statutory orders. So what are the components covered under the COP process mentioned in AIS 037? It is a safety glass, and related standard for the testing is IS 2553, brake hose IS 7079, horn Indian standard number 1884, tire 13154, CNG regulator ISO 15500, LPG vaporizer and regulator ECR 67. Then these are the components and the related standards: bulb, rear view mirror, speed limiting devices, seat belts, wheel rims for M and N category, light and lighting signaling devices for M and N category, retro reflectors for M and N category, warning triangles, light and light signaling devices for L category, retro reflectors for L category, retro reflectors for agricultural tractors and construction equipment vehicles, light and light signaling devices for agricultural tractors and construction equipment vehicles, door locks and retention components, fuel tanks, reflective tapes, rear warning triangles, replicable LED light source, wheel rims for L category of vehicles, rear marking plate, wiper blades, traction battery, that is a lead acid battery used in battery operated vehicles, high security registration plate. So these were the components, or these are the components which are introduced for the type approval certificate and also the conformity of production, that is COP. Now COP mainly has the below basic elements, that is the compliance to the technical standard, which means the compliance to type approval, and once the compliance to type approval, then it must be compliance to marking, and next phase is compliance to COP. So this is the four basic elements which goes hands in hand, one after another, for the components when it covers under conformity of production standard AIS 037. As I explained earlier, there are two types of standards which are notified in CMVR. One is AIS standards prepared by Automotive Industry Standards Committee, AISC, and IS standards prepared by Bureau of Indian Standards. I will just explain you the small difference between these two standards. The apex body in India to introduce the various standards, not only automotive but covering all other components, including household or electronic components, or the various systems, or the including also the vehicles and related components. So the standards published by BIS called as an Indian standard. When the discussions started for new standards for automotive area, components or the vehicle level, or the amendments to the existing standards, it was started discussions way back in around year 2000, that is 22 years back. But changing the standard or amendment in the standard or introducing new standard, it has a certain procedure laid down by the Bureau of Indian Standard, and the administrative process takes a longer time. To reduce that time, there was a committee formed by the Ministry, Automotive Industry Standards Committee, and the standards published by this committee called AIS, and these standards are directly notified by the ministry to say on time. After few months or few years, these AIS are converted into IS standard by the Bureau of Indian Standard by completing the administrative procedures. The standards which are not still completed, the administrative procedure by BIS are in existence as AIS, that is Automotive Indian Industry Standards. So, automotive industry, in short, automotive industry standards are finally get converted into Indian standard. The rule number 126A, as I explained, the authorized test agencies are ARAI, CIRT, ICAT, VRD, JRC, NATRAX, etc. The process, type approval process, whenever the customer or the manufacturer wants to apply for the type approval, he has to make an application, and with the application, there are certain formats or the checklist provided by the test agency. Those has to be filled out, and along with the technical specifications and the drawings, the application has to be submitted. The test agency will do the initial documentary appraisal. They will review the documents. Then there will be a pre-test inspection. This is nothing but a plant audit. Then the testing of the component for the type approval. Once the audit NCs are get clear and the test results are passed, the test agency issue the type approval certificate along with the marking to be appear on the component, type approval component, as per the checklist submitted by the customer or the manufacturer. Now, when this certificate is required, when supplying automotive components to India, and who can get the approval when intend to supply components to OEM India, either component manufacturer or OEM also can apply on behalf of component manufacturer. Suppose there is a supplier for some component, supplier A in Thailand wants to supply in a OEM in India, then OEM in India can apply for the type approval certificate for that particular component produced by the supplier A in Thailand. In this case, the OEM, while applying to the test agency, takes the complete responsibility of the quality of the component once the type approval certificate is issued. In this case, OEM is also the responsible for the COP related issues or any complaints raised by the end user. Also, the importer who is importing the components from the various country also can apply on behalf of the manufacturer, and in this case, even though the importer is applying on behalf of manufacturer, the plant audit is must, and importer who is applying has to arrange the visit of the test agency engineer for the plant audit. Now we'll go in detail with all the steps. Application for type approval. So when the manufacturers want to apply for type approval certificate to the test agency, whatever the information to be submitted along with the application is submit all relevant technical specifications specified in or the notified standard. As explained, the CMVR standard also specifies the component and the related Indian standards. So this particular Indian standard for the specific component also mentions the requirements also along with the specifications. So those specifications has to be submitted by the manufacturer to the agency, the authorized agency. Then details of manufacturing process and facilities, including the flow chart for the manufacturing process. Details of certification processes and facilities. So any in-house test facility is available, then has to give all the details about the in-house test facility. Then quality management systems implemented or not implemented. If implemented, then related certification like ISO 9000 or TS series certification like IATF, the copy of the valid certificate has to be submitted. Then the details of testing and inspection facilities, including all the instruments and the calibration records. Also, manufacturer has to declare approximately production plan in numbers. That is how much volume or how many components they are expecting to be produced in a year. So that production plan also needs to be declared in the checklist. And importantly, the location for affixing the marking. So in the drawing, manufacturer has to show the location for the type approval certificate mark, and additionally the individual standard for that particular component specifies few marking mandatory on the component. So all those marking manufacturer has to show in the drawing the place for this marking. The second is initial documentary appraisal. So test agency would study the type approval application, verify the test reports in case any submitted the earlier reports or in-house reports. They will go through the production processes submitted by the manufacturer, and then based on the appraisal, document appraisal, they will decide about the activities and prepare the schedule. Accordingly, they will also issue the invoice and the schedule for the each activity. So the important activity in this is the site assessment by the testing agency. Pre-test inspection, that is a plant audit, will be conducted to verify compliance of the manufacturer's quality management systems. So during the audit, the auditor will go through the production process. He will right from the raw material inward, raw material inspection, production process, and the end product testing or the quality controls. So auditor will go through the each and every process. He will go through the records maintained during this process, and finally he will prepare his report based on the all documents and records and the system what he observed during the plant audit. Test would be conducted on samples submitted by the manufacturer at test agency or at the test facility of the test agency. So components submitted by the manufacturer undergo the various tests mentioned in the specific standard related to that component, and based on the test results, the test report will be prepared and will be released. So after satisfactory completion of pre-test inspection, that is plant visit, and the type approval test, it means once the plant audit is conducted, auditor may have some observations or may have some non-conformities, may require some additional documentation or some additional records. So once the manufacturer submits the evidences or the required documents or the required records to the auditor, he prepares his report, site assessment report, and after testing, test engineer will also the test report. If both reports are clear, that means there is no further document required or any specifications required for the audit report also or the test report, then these reports will be reviewed and the type approval certificate will be issued. This type approval certificate, which includes the details of components, that means the specifications of components, also the location where this component will be manufactured, then who is the owner of the type approval certificate. As I explained you, not only manufacturer, but OEM also can apply or the importer also can apply. So accordingly, the owner of type approval certificate, that means the applicant name will be mentioned in the type approval certificate. Along with that, 6-digit type approval certificate number is mentioned in the certificate. Then this type approval certificate is along with the test report, and the test report number is also mentioned or referred in the type approval certificate. Date of issue and due date of COP. So next date for the conformity of production is also mentioned in the type approval certificate. The test reports, which includes the technical requirement, which standard is followed for conducting the test, outcome of the test. That means all requirements mentioned in the related standard along with the results or the evaluation results of the particular test are mentioned in the test report. Marking on type approval components. Each component should have the following type of marking: trademark or the manufacturer's emblem, unique ID code, type approval reference number 6-digit. As we see in an earlier slide, the type approval certificate is issued with the 6-digit tag number. So the same number has to be appeared in the component or has to be marked on the component. Marking is as mandated by the relevant standard. As I explained, the related Indian standard also have some additional marking requirements. Those must be followed and implemented on the marking with the particular component. Location of the marking, it is a discretion of the manufacturer. Manufacturer can decide, but while application, manufacturer has to show the location for the marking in the drawing. As explained, these markings are mandatory, but there are few components where marking is not required or not mandatory with the AIS 037 standard. The components like door latches or door hinges do not require any tag marking on that. So this 6-digit of the type approved component marking is like this. The first digit is who has issued or which test agency has issued the certificate, so their reference. Then the second letter shows the calendar year in which the type approval certificate is issued, and last 4 digits are the type approval certificate number issued by the test agency. So this is how the 6-digit type approval certificate number or the marking number is explained in the certificate. So these are the various letters issued to the each agency. If you can see the second number, the Automotive Research Association of India, ARAI, they have got the letter A. Similarly, the Indian Institute of Petroleum, P, or the Central Institute of Road Transport, R. So various letters are issued so that one can recognize from the approved number which test agency has conducted the audit and testing and issued the type approval certificate. So these are the letters for the years, and it will go further after the completion of this. So when it started, letters started from 1 to 9, and after 2010 it is like A, B, C for the each year. If you see the last or the second half of this particular slide, marking system for E-approved components or the ISI marked components. ISI marked component I will just explain in further slides. But if the component is having the E mark or E approved certificate, then as per European regulation, the E mark number is must on the component. So while applying for type approval certificate, if the component is having the E marking, then the manufacturer has the option to continue with the ECE marking, or he can additionally mark the tag number also. So manufacturer can choose, or manufacturer can declare that E marking only will be appear on the component and no type approval certificate number will be marked on the component. But this has to be declared while making the application, initial application, and filling up the checklist. Exemptions or the limitations in the marking system, as I explained, the door locks, door retention components, wiper blades, metallic fuel tanks, these are the exempted from the marking requirements of this standard. Non-metallic fuel tanks of categories L vehicles shall have approval marking as per this particular specific standard. However, in case of M, N and A category vehicles, only the trade name or trademark of the tank manufacturer shall be deemed to be meet requirements of this standard. So these all details for the limitations or the relaxations or the exemptions are mentioned in AIS 037 for the each component. The main responsibility of the vehicle manufacturer or the Indian agent or the importer. When I explain you, the OEM or importer can apply for type approval certificate on behalf of component manufacturer, then the responsibility lies with the vehicle manufacturer or the importer. In case of E-mark component, manufacturer should submit the certificate, E-certificate and test reports for E-marking. Also, the test and norms which are common between ECE or EEC and Indian standard should not be repeated. Pre-test inspection is exempted. Maintain the COP compliance is responsibility of the tag holder. So, if the manufacturer or importer is applying on behalf of component manufacturer, they are main responsible in this total type approved system and components. Components complying with the alternate standard of CMVR procedure would be same as E-mark components, because some CNG regulators or CNG components are notified in CMVR as per the international standards, that is ISO 15500. So, general definitions of COP. Conformity of production is a means of evidencing the ability to produce a series of products that exactly match the specifications, performance and marking requirements outlined in the type approved documentation. Conformity of production is required for type approval to ensure that production vehicles continue to meet, production vehicle or the component continue to meet and conform to the approved vehicle type or the component type. Once you get the type approval certificate with the type approval certificate number and manufacturer has decided on continuation of E-mark or the additionally the tag mark also, next phase comes the conformity of production. As I explained, the type approval certificate, the date of issue and validity date is also mentioned in the certificate. So along with AIS 037, each standard lists down the test requirements for COP also. So few standards specify all the tests to be repeated for COP, or some standards specify only the few tests from the all tests mentioned in the particular or the specific standard. So it depends. AIS 037 standard also specify the periodicity of the COP or the surveillance or the maintenance cycle for each component. Generally, it is 2 years, but for seat belt, it is 1 year. While COP process, the random selection shall be done from a lot of components which comprises at least 10 times needed for the test. So generally, for the COP process, the auditor visits for the plant audit, and during his visits, he goes to the production line, and from that he will select the samples for testing. And those selected samples will be tested at the test lab at the authorized test agency, and based on the results, the COP will be confirmed, and accordingly the COP certificate will be issued. The first COP period shall end on the respective 31st March or the 30th September after the specified COP frequency. It means even if you apply in any month of the year, initial application, the COP period is given to the nearest 31st March or 30th September, and then it continues every 2 years. So initial period may be less than by few months to the 2 years, or maybe few months more than the 2 years, depends which is the nearer March or the September from the date of application or the date of the type approval certificate. COP procedure for imported components. As I explained, in case of E-approved components, if the manufacturer submits a COP certificate from the respective European agency who had, or the agency who had issued the E-approval, the test agency, if satisfied after scrutiny of the report, need not to carry out any of the activities prescribed for surveillance checks. In such cases, compliance to COP requirements are deemed to be complied with. So, for E-component or E-approved components, if E-compliance certificate is submitted, then the COP requirements are deemed to meet and it will not be repeated. However, the following are the minimum information to be contained in the EC COP report, that is linkage to the type approval number, EC type approval number, validity period, reference to applicable plant of manufacturing, and reference to ECE regulation. So this detail must be appeared in the COP compliance certificate issued by the European agency. The test agency may carry out the surveillance check if test agency feels it is necessary to do so for any other specific reason. So even if you submit the E-certificate and standard has the provision not to repeat, but again it depends on the test agency, and if they feel, they may ask you to conduct all the tests or few tests or maybe 1 or 2 tests. It depends. Initially, the application has option of choosing the test agency for type approval from among those listed in rule number 126 of CMVR rule 1989. So, as I explained, there are many test agencies authorized or the appointed or the accredited by the ministry. The manufacturer has option and freeness to choose any test agency for the type approval certificate. The applicant can change the test agency if so desired for COP after obtaining type approval certificate. If you apply for type approval certificate to the test agency A, but during the COP, if you want to change and want to apply to the test agency B, it is still possible and there is no restriction. If the component is manufactured in more than one plant, so it means the same component with same specifications, same design, with the same process, same raw material is manufactured in more than one plant. The applicant has the following options of the type approved for compliance to this standard. One approval covering all the manufacturing plants, or different approvals each covering one or more manufacturing plant. So it depends. If the manufacturer wants to apply all plants in one application, it is possible. If he wants to apply different plants, different applications, still it is possible. The initial system audit shall be carried out for at least one plant among various plants, which follows the same quality management system based on the discretion of test agency, mutually agreed by test agency and the applicant. Here it is important is all the plants must have same quality management system implemented. Then for group of plants covered under one type approval certificate, COP checks shall be carried out for at least one plant among various plants, which follows same QMS based on the discretion of test agency, mutually agreed by test agency and the applicant. So if you apply for 4 plants in one certificate, in COP, test agency may select at least one, may select 2, 3 or all the plants for COP process. It depends the judgment or the confidence of the test agency, and also it will be mutually agreed, mutually discussed with the applicant. If the results of surveillance checks are not satisfactory, then shall be covered all the plants. So if one of the plant also the results are not satisfactory, the complete process or the type approval certificate will be on hold, because it will be also covered for the all plants. Components whose vehicle sets used is less than 500 multiplied by the number of years of the applicable COP period are exempted from the requirements of COP. So it is nothing but the low volume supply, which is mentioned on the website of Customs, Director General of Foreign Trade and the Customs, and accordingly particular number, if less than that number is supplied, then it is exempted from the COP certificate. However, applicant shall get COP exemption certificate for that particular period also. If the results of surveillance checks, that is COP, are not satisfactory, in case of any deficiencies are noticed in the facilities, documentation, reports, component during the surveillance check, the component manufacturer shall prepare a time-bound action plan for rectifying the defects. So it is maybe during the plant audit, auditor may have some objections on the records or the facilities or the processes, then he will discuss, and accordingly the manufacturer has to give the action plan to rectify those defects. Effectiveness of implementation of the corrective actions shall be verified during the next surveillance checks. It again depends the severity of the corrective action or the non-compliance, and accordingly the corrective action on that. If the progress of implementation, if the progress of implementation of the corrective action is not satisfactory, the test agency shall report the matter to the CMVR Technical Standing Committee. So first step, they will discuss with the manufacturer about non-compliance. Manufacturer has to give time-bound action, corrective action. implement the corrective action, submit the evidences, but if the based on those evidences, if it is still not satisfactory, then test agency informs such matter to the CMVR Technical Standing Committee. Based on the feedback from the test agency regarding the action detail, CMVR Technical Standing Committee shall consider the necessary corrective actions to be taken, including recommendation to the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways for withdrawal of the type approval. So it again depends the severity of the non-compliance, and accordingly the action will be initiated by the related ministry based on the recommendation by the Technical Standing Committee. Based on the recommendation of the committee, the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways may issue the order for withdrawal of type approval certificate and stop dispatch of the components by the manufacturer from his works. So once the ministry decides, then they will not only withdraw the certificate, but they will also inform to the related departments like customs, so that there should not be any supply of those particular component is allowed inside the India. If the type approval has been withdrawn, reinstating of the type approval shall be done only after going through the various steps prescribed in this document. So once it is withdrawn, then after few period, manufacturer again want to apply, he has to repeat the complete process like initial application, then the type approval certificate, and then the COP. So all the steps what we explained till now are involved when the reapplication is submitted by the manufacturer. If the certificate is withdrawn, then the component manufacturer must inform to the relevant vehicle manufacturer about the status of the surveillance checks, especially in the cases where the deficiencies have been noticed immediately after the surveillance checks are over or the certificate is withdrawn, because it may create the problem to the CMVR certificate of the vehicle manufacturer. So every step for the audit and testing, the results must be informed by the manufacturer to his customer, that is a OEM in India. The test agency shall inform to Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers (SIAM) and Automotive Component Manufacturers Association of India (ACMA) about the status of the surveillance checks, especially in the cases where deficiencies have been noticed after the surveillance checks are over. So, as per requirement mentioned in the CMVR rule, the test agency also inform the deficiencies to the Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers and also the Automotive Component Manufacturers Association. Now we will go for the another scheme of type approval certificate. The another scheme is BIS approval, that is ISI mark. So this BIS comes under the Ministry of Consumers and Ministry of Commerce, whereas the CMVR comes under the Ministry of Highways and Road Transport. Now BIS has notified few components for getting the BIS license and marking ISI on those approved components, and only those components will be tested or will be applied to the BIS office. So first component BIS notified in 2016 was the tires, pneumatic tires and tubes. Then in phases they also apply for the glass and wheel rims. Because of the COVID situation, the implementation of glass and wheel rims is postponed, and it is in 2023 for both the components. So how the BIS process works out? It is a statutory framework BIS operates under the framework of the BIS Act of 2016 and the rules and regulations framed thereunder. The Bureau of Indian Standards Act 2016 was published for general information in Official Gazette on 22nd March 2016 and came into force from 12th October 2017. So BIS has mandated to satisfy the customer needs for quality of goods and service. So objectives of BIS: harmonized development of the activities of standardization, conformity assessment, quality assurance of goods, articles, processes, systems, and services, and for matters connected therewith in incidental thereinto. To provide thrust to standardization and quality control for growth and development of industry on one hand, and meet the need of consumer on the other hand. So BIS is playing a very important or very crucial role in the certification scheme in India. So these are the various activities handled by the BIS, like standardization, conformity assessment, product certification, registration and management systems, hallmarking, laboratory services, consumer affairs and publicity, training services, international activities, information technology services, sale of Indian standards and other publications, vigilance, project management and works, and administration and finance and accounts. So these are the three components from the automotive field are now mandatory for the ISI mark, and ISI mark mandatory means it must be applied to the Bureau of Indian Standards only. You cannot apply now these components to the test agencies mentioned in CMVR. So these are the implementation dates: automotive tires and tubes 2016, safety glass, as I explained you, it has gone or it has postponed, and now it will be the 1st April 2023. Wheel rims 22nd June 2023. Rear view camera 1st October 2021. So these are the implementation dates or the mandatory dates for these components for ISI mark. So how the BIS approval scheme works on. So here submission of application to BIS by manufacturer or by legal representative or by any agent in India. Once the application is submitted, they will review the documents and they will issue the acknowledgement number, application acknowledgement number. Then they will conduct the plant audit, which may be for 2 or 3 days, and they will conduct the sampling. So auditor from BIS or the appointed by BIS will also conduct the sampling during his visit for the plant audit. The selected samples has to be submitted to the BIS approved lab in India. Unfortunately, BIS has not approved any test lab outside India. So it is manufacturer's responsibility that the samples selected by the BIS auditor to be delivered to the test lab in India. The test agency will conduct the test, and this test report must be submitted to the BIS, and BIS will review the plant audit report and also the test report, and they will issue the license. So here in BIS scheme, they don't say the type approval certificate. BIS scheme, the word is license, issuing the license to use ISI mark. There it is a type approval mark. Here it is a ISI mark. Then marking of ISI mark, standard number and the license number on the component is mandatory. And then it comes under the COP and the license fees. So every year the manufacturer has to pay the minimum marking fee, license fee, and additional marking fee if the volume is more than the specified in the standard. So there is a minimum marking fee for the certain volume of that particular component, and if you use the ISI mark more than the numbers mentioned there in the standard, then accordingly you have to submit the your production records and pay the additional marking fee to the BIS office. Here, importantly, it is not only the marking fee is not depend on the components exported to India. It is depend on the components manufactured with ISI mark at the manufacturing location, because there are many countries with different marking, and manufacturer, instead of changing the molds, keep all the markings on all the components so that any component can be exported to any country. So in this case, if you produce 10,000 components and only supply 1,000 components to India, still you have to pay the marking fee on 10,000 components because you use ISI mark on 10,000 components. So this is very important while paying the marking fee. Once the license is granted to the manufacturer, then he has to submit the copy of agreement with BIS, and there is a standard format of this agreement, and this agreement must be signed by the head of the plant. Then manufacturer also has to submit the performance bank guarantee of $10,000. So this bank guarantee is against the marking fee. Then pay the marking fees as mentioned in license issued by BIS. So while issuing the letter with the license, BIS mentions the marking fee applicable for that particular component, which has to be paid by the manufacturer. Every shipment details to be submitted on BIS website. So once the license is issued, BIS will also give you the guideline. So whenever you are exporting, every shipment, the details of every shipment has to be mentioned on the BIS website. It is very important because accordingly the access is given to the Department of Foreign Trades so that the customs people can see the details of the shipment and also the details of license, and accordingly they will clear the shipment from the customs. Also, manufacturer has to reply to the queries raised by BIS. Sometimes there may be some queries by BIS or by customs, or even sometimes BIS gets the complaint from the end user. Based on that, BIS raised the query. Now here important is another important difference from type approval certificate to ISI mark is for BIS application from foreign manufacturer, the local representative or the legal representative in India is must, because legal representative is the first communication contact for BIS. Any complaint or any communication is with the legal representative by BIS. In turn, the legal representative has to communicate the same to the manufacturer, and accordingly the actions if required has to be taken and informed to BIS. So legal representative is very much important in this ISI marking application. Surveillance. BIS conduct every year with the plant audit, sampling and testing. It is a BIS policy and mentioned in the BIS Act but sometimes only submitting the records of production, internal testing, and pay the marking fees, BIS accept. But it totally depends, because before at least 3 months in advance of validity of your license, manufacturer has to apply for renewal of license. He has to pay the marking fee, he has to pay the renewal license fee, and based on the availability of the auditor or the other document evidences, BIS takes the decision and then requests to submit the records of production, internal testing, and ask only to pay the marking fee. In that case, BIS don't visit for the audit or for the sampling. So based on the documents, they will issue the renewal of license. Sometimes BIS conduct the market surveillance also. Again, this is an important difference. In type approval component certificate, the CMVR, there is no market surveillance. But in BIS Act, market surveillance is also involved. In this case, BIS will purchase the components from the market, and they will seal those components and contact or communicate to the local representative or the legal representative in India, and legal representative has to collect those components, submit to the test agency which is approved by BIS, and pay the necessary testing fee, get the test report and submit to BIS. So highlights are, in BIS system, legal representative is must. Then below charges like BIS audit fees, license or marking fees, auditors per day charges, travel cost, performance bank guarantee, this has to be paid to BIS directly by the manufacturer. So here third party payment is not accepted by BIS. Then license is valid provided every year surveillance is conducted, marking fee is paid. So this is very important again, that every year the surveillance has to be conducted and marking fee and renewal license fee has to be paid to BIS. Documents submitted for BIS application. It is an application form, company registration certificate. If it is in your local language, it must be translated in English, readable English. Then authorization letter from the CEO in the name of authorized signatory. So all the documents has to be signed by authorized person, and this authority has to be defined by the CEO of the company. So one letter on the letterhead of the company will be issued by CEO mentioning Mr. X and X is authorized to sign all the documents related to the BIS license or the BIS application. Then further documents will be signed by the authorized person. Then the map showing the factory location, process flow chart covering all processes of manufacture, complete list of manufacturing machinery. In case few operations are outsourced, then details of such processes and the controls, complete list of testing facility, copies of calibration certificates of testing equipment, consent letter from BIS recognized laboratory if no in-house test facility. If you don't have your test facility available with you, then you need to get the letter from the BIS authorized test agency that this facility is available for testing as per the particular standard. Then next is plant layout. Then appointment letter of quality control personnel indicating his name, experience, qualification, date of appointment, and also attach a copy of each of the qualification certificates of the quality manager. Then copy of each of the test report, supplier's test certificate for each of the raw material and the components. Copy of in-house or independent test report. appointment letter for local representative and agreement with local representative. There is again the standard format available for the agreement between manufacturer and the legal representative. So that appointment letter plus agreement is also to be submit, and the drawing of each size or that particular component. So this is typically the ISI marking. Proportions for this marking for the each dimension is mentioned in the below table. So this is as far as the AIS or the IS as per CMVR and the BIS approval process is concerned. I had explained in detail the process, the documentation, and also the COP or the surveillance. Now, in this complete process, how TUV Runland India can support you? Our understanding the technical specifications of the standard, selection of worst case in case more than one type is applied. Then we support for selection of extension criteria, whether all tests to be conducted or few tests or no test is required for the extension. Then application and all the document preparation, review of those documents, then submission of application to test agency, technical discussions, technical negotiations with the test agency, finalization of scope, getting schedule for plant audit and testing. If required, accompany with the auditor during plant audit and testing so that the engineers see the smooth completion of the audit. Then arranging the visa and plan the travel for the auditor. In case test conducted at test agency in India, receiving of samples, submission of samples, test schedule, witness test if required. In case of any failure, then detailed information to the customer, receiving test report and type approval certificates. Information on COP. So when it is due, we inform you 3 to 4 months in advance that your COP is due and need to start the process immediately. Then technical interpretation for both test agency and customers. So TUV Runland is nothing but the bridge between the test agency and the customer or the component manufacturer. As explained by my colleague Mr. Ryan in our introduction, our Vice President Mr. Bandal and myself, we worked in a test agency, ARAI, that is Automotive Research Association of India, more than 15 years. So we know the each and every process, documentation, engineers in the ARAI. And this helps to get the efficient and fast service from ARAI to cater the requirements of the customer. So what TUV Runland and India cooperate with via MOU with ARAI. So TUV Runland India has the MOU, that is Memorandum of Understanding with ARAI, and you can see the MOU appearing in the website of ARAI. Recently it was extended. TUV Runland, we have the preferred technical service by almost all OEMs and tier 1 in India. We have experienced manpower, we have a customer oriented approach, and we have the experts in technical negotiations. Why ARAI amongst all those test agencies? This is India's first test agency. They have also the experienced manpower, world-class test facilities, customer-oriented approach, and active involvement in making standards. As I explained, the ARAI has the role of secretary in standard making committees, and they arrange all the meetings and actively participate in introducing or drafting the new standard or amendments in the standards. So this is from my side. If you have any question and answers, please ask.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Saraf, for the very in-depth sharing of the full process of the Indian type approval and explaining how one can gain access to the Indian market by partnering with Tooth Island. So we apologize that we have overrun the webinar timing, and we are so grateful for all who have stayed with us throughout the webinar. And for all the Q&A questions, we will be sending all the responses in email, in text after the webinar, along with the webinar recording, so that you have a copy in your mailbox for reference after today's webinar. So, and with that, we have come to the end of the session, and we hope that you find the webinar useful for your organization. And at the end of today's webinar, we will appreciate very much if you can complete the survey form to let us know what are the topics which will interest you for our future webinar series as well. So once again, on behalf of Tooth Island, thank you very much for attending the webinar, and we wish everyone a great day ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Bandel and Mr. Saraf as well. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ryan. I'm sorry for running short of time.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye.